Good afternoon. I'm Jen Dirks, President and CEO of Tempo Milwaukee. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Tempo Talk. We trust you are staying safe and healthy and have been able to enjoy some of the sunshine. And we will hopefully walk you through this webinar and then get you back outside as well. So thank you. Our Tempo Talk today is leading during time of crisis. We have a lot of Tempo Milwaukee members on the call, as well as our emerging women leaders and our guests. So thank you for joining us. For those of you new to a call today, or this is your first Tempo Talk, let me just briefly share a little bit about the evolution of our Tempo Talks. We started the Tempo Talk series right around all of the COVID changes and the challenges late March, and really wanted to take this time and take these webinars to feature our Tempo Milwaukee members, their expertise, different industries, and share their perspectives and offer up guidance on COVID-19. We hope these Tempo Talk webinars really serve as ways to keep our members engaged, informed, and certainly enlightened. The importance and the strength of a network like Tempo Milwaukee and our emerging women leaders is now more critical and more important than ever. So we hope that you are leveraging that network, and maybe these webinars are introducing you to new Tempo Milwaukee experts that you may have not been in touch with. So before I turn it over to our panelists and introduce them, a few housekeeping items. For those of you that maybe are attending your first Zoom meeting, we have muted all of our attendees, as well as disabled the camera and video for our attendees. You should see myself, as well as our featured panelist, and a PowerPoint presentation. We'll take you through a couple of slides throughout the next hour. We also want to hear from you. So if you have questions that come up that the information our panelists are presenting, please use the chat function or the Q&A function, and we will hopefully have 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's webinar to get through as many questions as we can. So we really encourage you to answer or ask your questions. With that, I'm happy to introduce our panelists for today. So beginning with Kathy Campbell. Kathy is Vice President, Corporate Marketing and Investor Relations for RIOS. She has more than 25 years of leadership experience in investor relations, communications, finance, and brand management. She has held roles of increasing responsibility at Deloitte, Brady Corporation, Johnson Controls, and now RIOS. She is a Marquette grad. Kathy joined Tempo in 2012 and currently sits on our Tempo Milwaukee board. Welcome, Kathy. Our second panelist today is Christy Garcia-Thomas. Christy is the Chief External Affairs Officer at Advocate Aurora Health. In this role, she is responsible for shaping the overall experience for patients, team members, and community partners in a broad and a strategic way. With a broad landscape to influence, she oversees diversity and inclusion, interpreter services, community relations, charitable giving through Advocate Aurora's foundation, community health, and community programs. She has more than 25 years of industry experience, including leadership roles as the president and CEO of UPath before joining Advocate Aurora. Christy joined Tempo in 2001, served as Tempo Milwaukee Board Chair from 2007 to 2008, and was our 2017 Mentor Awards recipient. Welcome, Christy. Our third panelist today is Anna Oakes. Anna is owner of Build High Performing Teams. In this role, Anna leads with a mission to restore humanity into our work and workplaces. After 20 years in the corporate world, she passed up the C-suite to positively impact more organizations and leaders. As a coach and consultant, she partners with organizations and leaders to leverage their humans for better business results. She also has a calling to serve the employees she calls intrapreneurs, who want to reclaim ownership of their career and maximize their individual and collective impact. Anna joined Tempo Milwaukee in 2015. A virtual applause and welcome to each of our panelists today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules to join us, and we really want to soak up the next hour in learning from you. So a unique feature to begin each of our Tempo Talks, and in the spirit of staying as positive as we can through all of this uncertainty, I've asked each of our panelists to share a personal mantra, something that is serving as motivation for them, especially during these challenging times. So Kathy, I'm going to start with you. What is your personal mantra?
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for that warm welcome. And thank you everyone for taking a moment out of this beautiful sunny afternoon to spend some time with us. My mantra, I have to admit, was stolen from my dear friend's 104-year-old grandmother, but I figure if you're 104, you must be pretty wise. And it's really be legacy minded. So if you think about your actions, your words, how are you going to be thought of when you're not here anymore? We think about the actions that we're demonstrating and modeling for our children, as we think about the projects that we take on at work, as we think about the relationships and the people's lives that we impact even in small ways. How are we being in our actions and in our words legacy minded? I think if we take that thought in everything that we're doing, we'll sleep well at night and leave a good path behind us.
I love that, Kathy. Thank you so much. And certainly a 104-year-old words of wisdom. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Christy, what about you? What is your personal mantra?
Thank you, and delighted to be here and be with all of you today. It's great to be with a dynamic group of women. So thank you all for joining us. My mantra is around the 3 F's, faith, family, and friends. I'm very focused on mind, body, and soul, being spiritually connected and being embedded with my family and my friends. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot of when I think about mind, body, and soul during a crisis is motivational quotes are very important to me, and every day I use time to reflect on those. And I've got a couple of simple ones that I thought I'd share with all of you. One is that anxiety is contagious. And in the environment that we're in today, there's a lot of anxiety. Be focused in the moment. You can't control the past and you don't know what the future is. So it's critically important to be present in the moment. Be with those who bring out the best in you, not the stress in you. We don't need any additional stress in our lives. So be mindful about those around you who are adding more stress than necessary. And my last one is, may my heart be kind, my mind fierce, and my spirit brave. And it's important to have courage as a woman executive prior to COVID, but even more so in this pandemic. Thank you.
I love that, Christy. Thank you so much. And I hope that our Tempo team was able to capture that, because we'll share that in the chat function. Those are really wonderful words to live by. So thank you so much, Christy. Anna, what about your personal mantra?
Hi, Jen. Yeah, I was thinking I have quite a few, but the one that I use most often, I say it to people, I say it to myself, I use it as my signature line, which is peace and progress. And I think that's what I hope for everybody, is that we have personal peace in who we are and what we're doing and how we're maximizing our impact in our career and our communities. And then progress. Are we continuing to get better in whatever that means to us? So peace and progress is something I think about multiple times a day.
Peace and progress. I love that. Thank you so much. So here's how we're going to begin today's session. Thank you, Anna. Christy and Anna, if you want to disable your video, it's totally up to you. We're going to begin with Kathy and focus a little bit about what these last couple of weeks have been with her from a RIOS perspective. So to set this up, what makes a good leader during a crisis? A leader's response to a crisis is much more than motivating speeches and keeping the lines of communication open. Still, there is no easy route through a crisis. And besides the obvious challenge of selecting the correct path to take, when trying to navigate the unknown, leaders also face the monumental task of reassuring management, employees, and the public. And I know Kathy, this is something that has been really near and dear to your heart for the last several weeks. So noting all of this, I want to begin today's conversation with you. I know you've prepared a couple of slides to walk us through the evolution of events for Clarios over the past couple of weeks, and particularly in the area of corporate communications, as well as that global perspective. So Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jen. I think we're going to bring up the first slide here. And as we were getting on this morning, Christy and I were talking about, how different each of our lives are, depending on the industries that we're in. The lives in those in healthcare right now are completely different than the lives of those of us leading in manufacturing. Obviously, a lot of principles that will cross over, but definitely unique challenges depending on whether you're in a small business, large business, or what industry that you're dealing with at this time. First, I just want to take a minute and say, some of you are probably like, what is Clarios? New brand. Actually just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. We were formerly a division of Johnson Controls. We're $8 billion in sales and sell 153 million batteries across the world. We're the world's leading supplier of automotive batteries. 1 in 3 vehicles around the world are powered by a Clarios battery. A lot of history, size, scale, but one of the things I'm most proud of is our environmental sustainability and leadership. Most people don't know that lead acid batteries are the most recycled product in the world, with 99% of the materials being reused and made into new batteries. We recycle 8,000 batteries an hour within our network. So one thing to certainly be proud of as part of our Clarios mission. You can go to the next slide. And one of the things that Jen really asked us to cover was what's the state of things at Clarios. Investor relations is part of my role, and we just happened to have an earnings call this week. So I have to admit I stole this from my earnings deck because our investors were very curious as to what is the state of things at Clarios, and this is kind of what we use to keep them updated. We're in a bit of a unique position, and a lot of it has to do with those things I just talked about in the last slide. That global scale. Jen's talking about dealing with this for the last couple of weeks. We've really been dealing with this since January because China is a big market for us, and so we've really been learning as this pandemic has moved across the globe. What has done in China, then it moved into our EMEA plants, and then quickly into the Americas. We're a bit unique that we are a critical and essential business, not necessarily one that you would think of like healthcare, where obviously the hospitals have to stay open. But if you think about the ambulances that need to get to the hospital, all those the groceries to the grocery store, all those Amazon packages that are coming to your house, a battery is a critical element of powering that transportation sector. So we've really been able to stay open during this time period, and 80% of our profitability comes from that aftermarket segment versus the other part, just the batteries that go into new cars. So that really allowed us to stay open in many cases, albeit at lower levels because people weren't out buying batteries, but really provided an element of stability for this going through. But the way that we have dealt with this is a global pandemic team. We've met 3 times a week, 6 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and team meetings on Tuesday. So I'd have to say our team has never been more connected. But then it's really about empowering the regions to be able to lead within those global guidelines. One of the biggest unique challenges of the global organization is Europe became countries, the US became states. It was not only just dealing with, the continent or what used to be kind of united European regulations. Now it was what's happening today in Italy, then Spain, then Germany, and how do we adjust and adapt our business in alignment with what's latest and greatest and what's changing with our customers. And the same was true as we came into the US and all the states began to change and adapt their regulations. So we literally had a daily report coming out from our intelligence teams on both our aftermarket and OE as far as what are those changes and the shifts in regulations and how do we adapt our business so that we can most effectively manage through this. So I'm incredibly proud of the team and incredibly proud of how everyone has come together, but definitely a very unique period. And we're actually seeing a huge rebound as we're coming out of this, with our China and our China business in March and April above prior year levels. EMEA, the March was most challenging, but April and May, I mean, we've cut this off at 150%, but it's been significant, and we're starting to see that with the US kind of trailing a couple weeks behind Europe. So now the challenges and the focus is, what are those protocols as we ramp our business back up to full production levels? How do we continue to keep our people safe, and how do we get back to working in the office? And so that's really been our shift in our focus. You can go into the next slide. As Jen said earlier, she also wanted me to kind of touch on from a communications perspective. The global communications is part of my role, and we really needed to shift the way that we communicated with our employees and figured out, how do we make sure that we connect? How do we build confidence in our people that we're doing the right things to keep them safe? How do we give them resources to keep them informed? It's very easy to get distracted and not understand what's really going on. So we created a dedicated SharePoint site that we launched. You can see it's had, this is old data as of our board meeting, but over 10,000 views of people going there and looking for information, a way for them to ask questions and get those answered very quickly. We shifted our town halls to be global in video. We added weekly updates from our CEO just to be completely transparent about what was going on as we were, bringing down production and plants, shutting places down, very open and honest of what was going on in the business, what are we seeing from our markets, and what are we doing with the additional measures that we've put in place to keep our people safe. And also very importantly, being aligned with across the globe on what are we communicating to our customers. Not only making sure that we're well informed and they're well informed, but also now as we're ramping back up, making sure that we're connected across the supply chain to make sure that timing is aligned and we're going to be able to serve our customers and respond to the demand in the marketplace. We also added weekly newsletters from our regional general managers. So we had a kind of a global message from our CEO every week via video, and then a newsletter that came specific to the region that was a bit more detailed. And so a lot of great communication that took place, and the team did a great job kind of shifting and adapting. The last piece that I didn't really call out on here, but I wanted to talk about, because it was really one of the most important questions that we kept getting from our employees, was what are we doing to support our communities during this time? And that was one part of our role, was how do we quickly, and an important part of our culture, how do we quickly come up with how we're going to play a role in supporting the communities during this very challenging time. And we were able to do a global partnership with UNICEF into supporting their COVID-19 efforts, and then really empower each one of our regions to do something that really was meaningful for them on a local basis, to feel like they played a role in supporting our communities as we battled through this crisis. So next slide. The other question Jen had asked me to talk about was, obviously the new Supreme Court ruling came out this week, and does that impact you? And then do you have a return to work protocol? As I mentioned before, we are a critical and essential business. We largely stayed open. So it's really been from a plant standpoint, it's how do we ramp back up to full level safely? But from an office standpoint, it's a very different challenge. I would say from the Supreme Court ruling has much more of an impact, I think, on smaller businesses that, you know, have been completely shut down, and it's become business critical to get up and running to support their livelihoods and really from a survival perspective. You know, we've been largely very effective at working from home. So now it's really just from an office perspective, how do we return to work? I included this slide with way too many words on it as a communication professional, but more as a takeaway for all of you, just because I think it has some thoughtful thinking in it. And as you're thinking about, each location is going to have unique challenges as they go back to office. Everyone has different setups. We've got open concept. How do you look at social distancing when you're in an open concept office location? What do you do with your conference rooms? What do you do with the stairs? How many people can you socially distance with in the elevator? So, I mean, there are so many things to think about. We've actually come up with a rotational plan so that every group is purposely 14 days out of the office, so that if we get an outbreak, that, you know, we don't have everyone that's required to stay home. So we're kind of in A, B, and C, each going a week, and then rotating out, but really starting on a voluntary basis to make sure that people are comfortable, they understand a lot of communications on what are the protocols, making sure that everyone signs an acknowledgement that they don't have symptoms, they haven't been exposed, and to verify before they come in the office. So a lot of work into this, and we started out with global guidelines and protocols, and then it really has to be adapted on a regional basis because each country, each state has regulations related to masks, et cetera, that you need to take into consideration. Next slide. And one of the last things that I wanted to cover that Jen asked me was, you know, what would you share from a leadership perspective as you're leading through a crisis? And, you know, I think as you're going through crisis, it's so easy to get caught up in the emotions, caught up in the media, caught up in the politics, that you really need to force yourself to step back, stay informed, understand the facts and data available. Obviously in a crisis, there's never enough facts and data available, but let that guide you to make pragmatic decisions. Maybe a best way to explain this is related to masks. I think that's one of our biggest great debates across our locations and in many places of, how do we decide if we're going to make everybody wear masks or not? If you look back and look at the data, it's at the bottom of the pyramid as far as effectiveness. So if we're making choices, how are we making sure that we're putting all of those measures to keep people safe first, and we're using masks, especially if they become a limited resource? We know that if everyone in every location needs a new mask every day, we're not going to have enough. So are we going to have to prioritize that limited resource to those who have a compromised immune system, or those who are coming off of protocols, and then really focus our efforts and energy on those things that we know are the most effective ways to reduce the spread of the disease. So it's really just, stepping back. This is why organizations have crisis plans. So all of that thinking doesn't need to be taking place during the time of the crisis. You have a thoughtful way to think through it so that you can take some of the emotion and the anxiety out of the decision making. And I think that was all I had.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy. I mean, certainly you do. I know in my background too, working through a crisis communications plan and putting it into, at least having it in your archives and files, but never hoping that you have to resurrect it. And certainly it's really, thank you so much for sharing what RIOS has done, what you and your team have done, how you've been able to adapt and adjust. It's really, we often hear it's learning or leading through uncertainty. And so I took a couple of notes in terms of, the lessons learned from a global perspective, which I think you're in a unique position. So thank you for sharing that. And I love that charitable arm as well. And really, having that impact lens on. So thank you, Kathy. We'll bring you back in a moment, but I want to now turn this over to Christy Garcia Thomas from Advocate Aurora. So, Christy, if you can maybe give us a brief sense of, if you can, the state of things with Advocate Aurora. And I know we, just before the call, we were kind of talking about, it's just been an extremely challenging time. So talk a little bit about the state of things with Advocate Aurora.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And, you know, the dynamics with this pandemic is, you know, changing at fast pace. It's a very fluid environment for us. And, you know, maybe let me just take you back a little bit. We've been aware of COVID, you know, watching it from afar in other countries and planning for it. It came to Milwaukee on March 15th. We had our first patient at St. Luke's on March 15th. And by April 1st, we had over 100 COVID patients between St. Luke's and Sinai. It's a highly, highly contagious disease. It replicates quickly through human contact, which I know all of you have heard. And so we moved into crisis management. We started command calls at 3 a day, 7 days a week, 7 in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And have been continuously talking about the dynamic changes of what's happening. And when that, as we started with, you know, knowing that we had 100 patients, we had to plan for surging. We were projecting that if the numbers escalated to the point that we thought they were, we would potentially run out of beds and wouldn't be able to service all of our patients. So we had to refit our hospitals to open up more beds. Myself and members of my team quickly started taking on additional roles and responsibility that were outside of our traditional day jobs. We quickly, over the weekend, secured hotel accommodations for our frontline staff across both states. Because if you think about it, our nurses and our doctors were very concerned about you know, transmitting this disease, going back home. So we needed to get them into hotels. We needed to provide them with safe environments in which they could, you know, go home or go to a hotel, change, get back to work. Luckily, because of the stay-at-home orders, we did not see the surge hit the peak that we originally thought that it would. So now we've been really focusing in on testing. I'll tell you the current state at here in Wisconsin is there's over 11,000 patients with COVID. At Advocate Aurora Health in the state of Wisconsin, we're treating 1,421 of them, the majority being in the Milwaukee County area as well as Brown County. You know, and so we're on, you know, I'm constantly in calls with our board, with our CEO, with our executive team, along with, you know, our incident command, trying to react to the dynamics of what's happening throughout this pandemic. One of the things that we're really focused on now, and you'll see it on the screen, is our Safe Care Promise. You know, we have had patients who have not been able to get some of their elective procedures done as we've closed down non-urgent procedures during the stay-at-home shutdown. And we know that there's a concern from our patients around coming back into our facilities. And our number one priority is around safety, safety for our team members, safety for our patients, and safety for our community. We had launched our virtual applications well before COVID. I will tell you that COVID has now scaled those things. You know, we thought we might have 25,000 virtual visits in the first year, 2020. We're now well over 300,000 virtual visits. We will be masking all of our team members, all of our patients who come into our facilities. We'll have social distancing. We're retrofitting our waiting areas to make sure that everyone is 6 feet apart. We'll be doing a lot of the screening for our patients prior to coming in for procedures, and getting COVID testing through our drive-through testing that we're now propping up. And then making sure that we're doing additional disinfecting and cleaning throughout all of our facilities.
Christy, just incredible. I mean, thank you so much for sharing kind of the state of things. I know it has been more than a 24/7 operation for you. Again, just really want to thank you and those on the front lines in healthcare for all that you are doing. We have so many Advocate Aurora, Temple Milwaukee members, emerging women leaders, and they're sitting on all of our committees. And I'm so amazed that many of them are still joining calls and being really engaged. And you mentioned, and I was trying to rack my brain for which Advocate Aurora employee it was that was telling us that she was one of those making hotel arrangements. And that wasn't something that was in her job responsibility. But I guess I was just so truly impressed by, I mean, there's the saying of we're all in this together, but just that team atmosphere and collaboration. Can you talk a little bit more about, how your team has really come together?
Absolutely. I mean, we're a very purpose-driven organization. People who go into healthcare are in it to help others, and our purpose is to help people live well. And so because of that strong purpose culture that we have, it's been remarkable to see how, the courage of all of our team members who are running to the pandemic, if you will, and having their own personal anxieties, right? I mean, our team members have the same anxieties that everybody out there in the audience has. But each and every day we, and our frontline staff who are just phenomenal, get up every day to go in and serve and care for the patients. And if nothing else, it has strengthened our team and our purpose and our culture. Not that you would want a pandemic for that, we were already strong before it, but people who might have a day job before COVID quickly shifted into different roles when there was there's so many needs that we have to fill in this crisis. And so people were just picking up the ball saying, hey, I'll figure out the hotel accommodations, and just running with it and really showing leadership. And, you commented about the women who are part of Advocate Aurora Health, who are also Temple members. I mean, all Temple members are dynamic leaders, right? That's what we are. That's who we are. And in a moment of crisis, you'll see that come through time and time again.
Wonderful. Yes, they are all dynamic leaders. You yourself are a dynamic leader as well. So I want to talk a little bit, because we've heard this phrase so much, and it's something that, I've been challenged with as well, is how do you plan for the unknown? I mean, you're looking at, for Tempo, we're forecasting best case scenario, worst case scenario, but then it's constantly changing. And maybe talk a little bit about, since the title of today's session is Leading Through Times of Crisis, how do you, as a leader, how have you managed this challenge of planning for the unknown?
Yeah, so some of it is, we've made 1 billion decisions, if you will, in the last 8 weeks, and having to adapt to this pandemic. And in those situations, we're much more of a collaborative decision-making kind of organization. But when you're in the middle of a crisis and in the middle of a pandemic, you're making decisions sometimes where you only have a certain amount of the information. And then you also have to be willing to adjust, right? And, one of the things, on March 15th, when we had our first patient arrive in Milwaukee, we were still working, right? And within 48 hours, we made the decision that any of our non-designated employees, primarily if you think about it, your corporate offices, right? We shut it down and said we're working remotely. will work from home for those employees who can work from home and are non-designated can work from home. And just yesterday, we extended that all the way through March 31st, because what we know is that this virus, until there's a cure, it's here. And the only way that we can truly, truly keep it from surging is by adhering to the guidelines, right? So social distancing. I mean, I can tell you more about masks, and that, again, you know, that's not my day job, but masking is critically important. And I know there's a lot of, you know, push and pull behind that, right? But making sure that people are masked, washing their hands, just, you know, that, you know, washing your hands is so critically important.
Yeah, just that simple act, you know, the 20 seconds, and really can extremely help this. So, so one other thing, a point that I want to touch on, and then we'll bring in Anna. I do want to remind those on the call to use the chat function. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in, and I want to give Anna enough time to talk a little bit about what she's been doing as well. But Christy, one other question I read, and I pulled this stat from the Harvard Business Review, so bear with me, but 54% of executives feel they were being held accountable for problems outside their control. So this is, again, with a focus on leadership and knowing your leadership expertise within your organization. Sometimes it feels like you may be carrying the weight of the world, and it's often might be difficult to share your vulnerability. Talk about how you've managed that dynamic. And I think it's really important because we have a mix of leaders on our call today, from Tempo to our emerging women leaders. But talk a little bit about how you've been able to, you know, maybe not have the weight of the world or feel like you're carrying the weight of the world.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is surrounding yourself with great people who have great skill sets, who can also help carry the load. But as I was thinking about the question you were asking me, you know, leadership doesn't exist if people aren't willing to follow you. And I think that a great leader shows actions more than words, right? And so being transparent, being vulnerable, sharing with, I share with my team my own personal anxieties that I might be having in this situation, right? And then also helping people understand, that to only be focused on the things that you can control. Those things that are outside of your control, they just create anxiety for you, right? And so if you're focused on the most important priority and driving towards that, the other things will fall into place. But I do think that a true sign of a great leader is someone who has a great team around them that is willing to follow them, right? And then you let them go, right? You just let them go.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a great team around you. You're very surrounded. I mean, many of them are Tempo Milwaukee members, and you're truly a great team. And I believe it was you that shared anxiety is contagious. So, good thing to keep in mind. So thank you, Christy. We'll bring you back in a second. Anna Oakes, I'm going to turn this to you. So Anna, just as a reminder for those of you on the webinar, she is the owner of Build High Performing Teams, left the corporate world, and this is really, has become your passion. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of maybe let's start with the top qualities that you see in a great leader. And I'm going to have you unmute yourself, Anna. There you go. Perfect.
Yes, I could not mute my video because I borrowed my husband's laptop after spilling water on my laptop minutes before the session. So his bald head kept popping up. So
no worries, you're here. So that's good.
Yes. And, just to acknowledge Christy and Kathy being on the front lines from a leadership perspective, not only from the medical perspective, but just being a leader is a tremendous amount of responsibility and work. And so, now that I've left corporate, after 20 years in corporate, I've been out on my own for 4 years. One of my roles is typically to support leaders like Kathy and Christy behind the scenes, as a coach, as a consultant. And so my heart goes out to them and all of you who are sort of on those front lines in these organizations. As far as characteristics that I think of a leader anytime, but also during times of change, I'm a strengths-based thinker. So I want people to operate from their zone of strength. So when we are trying to be something that we are not, I know that Christy, you just shared sharing your vulnerability, sharing your feelings, right? If we are trying to be too Pollyanna, people can sense that we're holding something back. We need to show those spectrum of feelings. And so come from a place of strength, show that emotion. Maybe two other points that I would consider. One is being very intentional. It's now more important than ever to stop and be intentional in the way that you're approaching your teams, both collectively and individually. And so thinking about what the dynamic humans that report into you, and sometimes that's a skip level down, right? If you're a leader of leaders, what do those people need? And that can be very overwhelming because it is very different. But I think if you're intentional and approach that both from a macro perspective with your team, but then a micro connection perspective every day, you can be intentional to engage in the way that works best for your people. And that may change during times of stress. So it's the intentionality, and then I would also add empathy. I think a lot of leaders get scared of that word, thinking it's too soft. It's about crying on the stairs with one of your coworkers, when truly it's about understanding that they might have different feelings than us, and then meeting them where they're at and helping them get through that, right? It's not our job to fix them, but we can show empathy for workloads. We can show empathy for homeschooling, if you can call, certainly not what I'm doing, by the way, with my 9-year-old twins. I'm sort of occupying them as much as I can, but we have to show empathy for the different situations we're in. I love that statement that I saw online maybe over the last couple of weeks, that we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same water, but we are in different boats. And so acknowledging that from a place of leadership, really important right now.
I love that. Yeah, we've heard so much about empathy, and if this that might be a quality that's going to come out even more. I mean, the work from home stresses of homeschooling, as you had mentioned, just being more empathetic as a leader, as a peer, as an employer, and knowing that we're all going through different stages of this and different evolutions of this. So you mentioned a lot about leading with intention, and I know that your business model, and one of the things that you talk a lot about, is this 3 personas of leaders can adopt to kind of lead themselves. Can you talk a little bit about these 3 personas?
Yeah, actually, right when COVID-19 hit, I took a step back and just said, I've had to manage through quite a few changes, economic, and otherwise in my 20 years in corporate America. What did I need to do to meet my people and sort of help guide them through this change? And what did they need most from me? And so I thought about the 3 things they needed most. And then I used a technique that I've used for quite a number of years, which is sort of developing that alter ego. Who can I call on? What characteristics can I call on from either a specific person or maybe a type of person? And so I came up with that sort of these 3 alter egos that we could lead through change. So the first situation I said we need to be there for is managing ambiguity. There's a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of leaders don't want to say anything because there's so many unknowns. And really my top tip for that, guys, is to say, here's what I know is truth, right? And then here's what I'm hopeful for, because they do need to hear both, right? What is truth, and here's what we know, which might not be a lot, but here's what we're hoping for the future. So as you're managing ambiguity, I have this on-demand webinar that we made, so leaders can log on to our website anytime and watch it. The alter ego for that is the painter, right? Illustrating the picture. Almost think about back in the 90s when you stare at those posters until the little picture would come together. That's our job, is to continue to slowly but surely make the picture of what's next for the organization, what's next for the team, and what's next for their career. So managing ambiguity was the first one. The second one is conserving our energy and leveraging our strengths, right? We need to maybe stop or pause doing some of the things we were doing before so that we can conserve that energy and put them towards new things. And the new things that we're putting our energy towards should be aligned with our strengths. And I say, really have a conversation with your people. If you're not sure what their strengths are, even if you feel confident that you know normally what their strengths are, ask again, right? Ask monthly, ask weekly right now. Where are you at? What type of work do you need to be doing? What support do you need from me, better or differently as a leader? So the second one was conserving energy, leveraging strength. And that to me was an ER doctor, right? Somebody who can quickly come in, triage, you're going here, you're doing this, that's less of a priority, this is more of a priority. And then the third area of need and persona was being someone that others want to follow, right? And that goes to the empathy, that goes to the vulnerability. And the persona that I picked for that was really this motivational speaker. So whether you want to think of somebody like Brene Brown, Mel Robbins, Tony, or is that Mel Robbins? Yeah, Mel Robbins, Tony, even Rachel Hollis, right? Somebody who's sort of creating that experience and showing who they really are so that people want to follow them.
That's perfect. That's great. So I know that I think I'm writing all of these down. Managing ambiguity. I love this. We've got a couple of questions coming in. I want to ask a couple of questions specifically you, Anna, and then we'll bring back Christy and Kathy. But talk a little bit. So we talked a lot about leaders, and we've talked about the employees, and that kind of dynamic. But what is your advice for leaders to encourage their employees to really take ownership of their career and have impact during this challenging time?
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that even during normal times, it's hard for an individual to completely own their career, right? They're sort of put in this structure of system with a lot going on and a lot of different personalities and a lot of different work. So it starts out hard, and then we put it into a time of change. So really, I think it starts with a conversation. Leaders need to voice, I want you to own your career. I want to understand how you want to maximize your strengths, how you want to leverage your time and talents here, especially during this time of change. Saying things like, we do need you. I need you as a leader, right? This is the area that I really need you to maximize your impact in. How does that feel, right? So I think start by having that conversation. Tell them that you want them to take more ownership and make a bigger impact. Ask for their opinions repeatedly, right? As often as you can. What do you think about that? I mean, I'm even upping that with my team, and we've always been virtual, right? I have a team of 5. I'm asking them about everything. What do you think about this blog? What do you think about this other thing? I just let them give input, not only so that they feel involved right now, but so that they can start practicing what that feels like, maybe to take more ownership.
Yeah, Anna, I love that. I mean, the sense of you're still bringing value to this organization, and asking them for their opinions, asking them, help us walk through different scenarios. I think we're all trying to kind of figure this out, even as leaders. And so to get that validation or to get the input from your employees, just to again reiterate their value to the organization. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I'm going to bring back Christy and Kathy, because we've got one question that I know, Anna, you talked a little bit about, but I would love to get the input from both Christy and Kathy. So one of the attendees asked, do you have any strategies in place to receive feedback from the employees of your organization? Is there one action or communication strategy that your employees seem to really applaud or appreciate as to how leadership has handled this crisis? So Kathy, I know that was a lot, but I'm going to maybe start with you from a corporate communications perspective. How, have your employees applauded or appreciate, is there a communication strategy that has helped you?
Yeah, and as part of that CEO video that we're sending out weekly, we actually attach a survey with each one of those. So not only are we asking people what their top questions are, we're also asking them for feedback. What do they want to know more about? And then we're utilizing that feedback as we put the next message together. How do we take the themes from that and make sure that the CEO addresses those top questions within his message of the next week? Like I said, we also have kind of a Q&A and an open discussion board on our COVID-19 SharePoint site. So people, obviously we have we try to continue to have a structured amount of Q&A that's out there. We put resources out there from CDC and the World Health Organization. But we try to make sure that we're being proactive in getting back to any of our employees to address their concerns, and then post those so that everybody else can share and benefit from those questions.
Christy, I know you, when we were on our call earlier, you had mentioned a 2,000 person attended webinar. Might that be one of your communication strategies?
Yeah, so we have a tremendous, robust communication plan as you think about, you know, our priority is safety. And so there's lots of protocols coming out through CDC around safety measures and how our clinical care team has to work in different environments. And so in addition to our COVID resource guide that we have, that we update on a daily basis for our internal team members, we also have one for our patients that they can go to and get their answers, questions answered. We also do live webinars just like this with our CEO and our executive team, our incident command team on a weekly basis. And our team members, 70,000 team members, can ask questions live, and we answer the questions live so that we're giving immediate response to what's on their mind. We did the same thing yesterday and extended the invitation to over our 1.5 million patients that we have in both states. And we had several thousand of our patients attend that live webinar, in which we then also took live questions as well.
Well, that's incredible. Yeah, thank you so much for both sharing. And Anna, I want to get your impression too, because you know, you look at RIOS, you look at Advocate Aurora, both really large organizations. Yeah. I loved your answer to this question in the chat box about maybe for the small businesses that are on the phone, or maybe a smaller organization.
Yeah, you know, and I think this part, as I was listening to Christy and Kathy, one addition that I would make, and they probably are already doing this, but just so everybody has the clarity, is that I think you need to do it in a variety of ways. If you're seeking feedback, you need to do it in ways that, you know, are either paper-based, if you've got a Dropbox, you know, having that SharePoint site. I would always say to include one that is anonymous so that people can submit feedback and not feel like that it might come back to them. And so getting really creative in large scale change, I've been able to implement that with corporations too with a lot of success.
Hey, Jen, could I add to that too? I mean, I agree. And all the questions that we get from whether it's our patient or our team members, they are anonymous. And lots of multi-channels. But as you were asking the question around small businesses, through our diversity and inclusion work, we're doing a lot of town hall community-based sessions. Next week, we are doing a 3-part series to help our minority suppliers open up their doors and think about the types of work environment, how they're going to work through some of their opening up of the doors, what are some of the safety protocols, what are some of the legal issues they've got to be thinking about. So, you know, to your point of different types of channels, trying to be able to provide different information to different audiences is key. Agreed.
Thank you. Kathy and Christy, this might be directed to you as well, but you know, Kathy, you mentioned this get back to work kind of phased in approach that RIOS has identified. I think it was more like a ABCD. The question comes from one of our attendees about, was that did you start with a survey to your employees to figure out where their comfort was, or was that something you just kind of, you know, profiled a certain employee and different situations? So a little bit more about that phased approach.
So we've really had a core pandemic team, and it's included communications, legal, environmental health and safety, human resources, and then obviously our general managers. And you know, constantly looking out there for best practices and what are other companies doing, what is applicable to us, and how do we learn. So I think it was a combination of looking at best practices from other companies. It was looking and, you know, looking at resource. You know, I think one thing I failed to mention before is safety has definitely been our top priority through this whole thing as well. So as we listen to our environmental health and safety team, you know, what's important depending on the environment. and how do we come up with a plan that puts as many of the levers in place to protect our people as possible. And that's where they knowing the 14 days and trying to get as many people as we can, knowing that in order to put the social distancing in place, we can't have everybody at once. So it was really taking into consideration, what are the most effective measures to keep people safe? What can we do within those parameters given the spaces that we've had to deal with? And then really coming up with a recommendation, but also taking into consideration, schools are going to be closed the rest of the year. Does alternative daycare kick in? So, really taking a mindful approach to saying this can be, we're picking A, B, and C based on where you sit to make sure you can be 6 feet away from whoever's next to you. And then making sure that we have balance amongst the team so that we don't lose a whole team of critical resources at one time. But also knowing that people have unique situations in their home life right now. And so leaving it voluntary as we kind of roll back into that so that people can really deal with those multiple challenges in their lives.
Thank you, Kathy. We are just about at the top of the hour. I want to ask, hopefully we can fit in 2 more questions, but for all of the panelists. This is one attendee that had asked for all the panelists, what have you learned about yourself by leading through the pandemic? What have you learned about yourself? Anna, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, so one, I'm not meant to homeschool my children. And I'd like to say that maybe I would be if I wasn't trying to run a business or being a leader like everyone else on this phone call, but I really do not think that's true. I have now proven that. I have twin 9-year-olds. So that is not something I have a strength in. And then 2, I think it's been for a lot of people a time to reflect on how we're using our time and talents and how we could continue to use those differently. And so I haven't made a huge pivot. I know that word's being talked about a lot. I haven't made a huge pivot, but my team and I have made slight adjustments so that we can be meeting our clients where they're at, but also we can feel alignment with the work that we're doing and how we're using our time talents.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Christy, what about you? What have you learned about yourself?
So I similar to Anna, I do personal training for my family. So, I mentioned earlier that mind, body, and soul is critically important to me. And even though, the hours are 14-hour days, I still take time, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night to do some form of exercise. And so my daughter's gym teacher wasn't having her do exercises. So now the whole family, we're doing exercises together.
That's awesome. That's perfect. I have ended I've shared on multiple webinars now is that I've ended my day with an hour-long walk, and it's my Zen moment at the end of the day, and that's part of my routine. So thank you, Christy, for sharing. Kathy, what about you?
I think, it's probably been about resilience and agility. If you would have told us that, we were going to be homeschooling your kids and navigating changes of a global pandemic that's, at times taking out 50% or more of your business, and been able to pull together as a global team and being successful in that, it's amazing what resilience a team and personally you can have and how you can adapt to what's required, and also just the mindfulness of what you need to stay grounded. It's starting the days being grateful for what we do have versus all the challenges that we're in. We think about what many others are having to go through right now. Being stuck in your house kind of pales in comparison. So it's starting each day with gratitude and trying to end each day with gratitude. And then, understanding what you need to do to feed yourself before you can feed others and be resilient in your leadership.
Well said. Thank you so much. Thank you, all three of you, for taking the time today. I know your schedules are insane and crazy, and we just so appreciate you, appreciate the guidance and the wisdom that you have provided to us. This is a recorded session, so those that weren't able to join, they will be able to listen to this webinar. We'll send it out in our Monday message. So thank you again, Christy, Kathy, Anna. Really grateful. Thank you for your leadership.
Of course, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
A couple of things that we're going to run through. So something that we started new to continue the conversation. This is kind of that networking arm of Tempo Milwaukee. So on Tuesdays, we've started our Tempo Talk Backs. So we will continue this conversation, exact conversation, in more of a very social setting and networking type of webinar session. So if you're interested in continuing that conversation, you maybe have questions for Anna or Christy or Kathy, let us know. We can get it either to them or join us, and just for a really great networking session. So that is Tuesday, May. The date is a little wrong, but we'll update that. But Tuesday, this coming up Tuesday from 4 until 5. And then our upcoming Tempo COVID Talk series next Friday, May 22nd, Show Your Support, Lessons Learned from 3 nonprofit leaders, Patty Gorski from Make-A-Wish, Jerry House from Pearls for Teen Girls, and Linda Benfield, who is the board chair of United Way. So they'll talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted nonprofits and how they've been, here's that word again, Anna, pivot, and how they've been able to pivot their organizations. And then on Friday, May 29th, the future of gathering. It looks vastly different, and kind of how are we salvaging summer. So we'll talk with Jody Gibson from the Zoological Society, Sarah Mayo from the Wisconsin Center District, and Peggy Williams-Smith from Visit Milwaukee will join us on the 29th. So thank you again. It looks like it's still shining out. The sun is still shining outside, so go out and enjoy. Thank you to Kathy, Christy, Anna, and all of our attendees. Enjoy your weekend.
Peace and progress. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
you.